Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fifth Child podcast, the weekly podcast where you get two different recommendations, be them video games, anime, movies, television, and the like. I am your podcaster for today, Chris, and I just want to say welcome again to the next episode of the podcast. So this weekly podcast, unfortunately, is going to have a couple shorter episodes for the next couple weeks. I'm actually recording these in bulk while I have the free time. My free time is going to get a little bit limited for the next 2 weeks, just some personal stuff going on, and unfortunately, my own schedule is getting a little cramped right now. So these next episodes are likely only going to be somewhere around maybe 20 minutes to like a half hour in length. But that also means that, for the most part, I'm just going to get into the nitty-gritty of exactly what we're talking about for these next two episodes. So there's not going to be a lot. I'm going to try to cut out... I'm not going to try to cut out as much content as I can, but I want to give you as short and concise recommendations as possible. So with that, I'm going to just go ahead and jump right into the first recommendation for today's podcast. So I have two different recommendations. I have an anime and I have a video game. The anime that we are going to be talking about today is going to be The Rising of Shield Hero. The Rising of Shield Hero is a newer anime that recently was released in January of this year and actually just recently aired its last episode in English, actually, yesterday. I just finished it yesterday night, or last night. And and obviously, I think now is a good time to talk about it now that the series is completely done. The Rising of the Shield Hero is animated by Studio Kinema Citrus, who had also done Made in Abyss, which is another one of my favorite series, one we might come around to talking about once more. The anime is currently licensed by Crunchyroll and Funimation in kind of a joint licensure. And at this time, aired every single Wednesday. The series is now completely done, so it's completely fair game for any sort of binging now. The series only lasted about 25 episodes, and hopefully we have a season 2 somewhere in the mix. The series itself is based off of a light novel series by Anako Usagi, which is now at this point finished. At least, or I believe it's ongoing at this time. So let's go ahead and jump into the vital stats of this series. So the story itself is going to be the first thing we're going to be talking about. So the story of The Rising of Shield Hero is another one of those isekai sort of anime. An isekai anime is a series that was popularized by Sword Art Online, where you have a normal teenager, a normal person in their everyday life who all of a sudden gets kind of pushed into this kind of fantasy-like setting. And that's generally what Rising of Shield Hero is about. The main character of The Rising of Shield Hero is Naofumi Iwatani, a Japanese kind of NEET who gets summoned into this parallel world along with three other young teenagers from their own different parallel universes where different things occurred in different alternate histories, and they're now pushed into becoming the world's cardinal heroes, and are forced by the kingdom of Melomark in order to fight against these interdimensional hordes of creatures that are summoned through these waves. Each of these heroes has been equipped with some sort of cardinal weapon: a spear, bow and arrow, a sword, while Naofumi himself was given a shield, the legendary shield. So the big snag with this entire story is that while the other three heroes, the sword hero, the spear hero, and the bow and the arrow hero, have all been given enough resources that they needed in order to fight against the waves, Naofumi is given the short end of the stick because of some unknown prejudice of the shield hero. So Naofumi is forced to deal with all this prejudice from all sides of the kingdom, and the king itself, his resources are lacking, and to make matters worse, the princess of the kingdom completely frames him for a crime that he did not do, which basically pushes him down from having only slightly less resources to even less resources. So this pushes Naofumi to become more and more cynical of this world and forces him to work as a loner just in order to survive, until he eventually gets the help of a slave girl, a demi-human known as Raptalia. who they then eventually form a bond together with, and who Naofumi uses to who helps him get stronger in order to fight off the waves. There's even more people that there's more people that he runs into. He runs into a bird monster known as Philo, who transforms from a little girl into a bird. There's another princess known as Melty, who is a spellcaster who helps him out. And together, all four of them work together, and all together, the four of them work in order to fight against the waves that eventually come down, while also dealing with some of the shady goings-on that's going on in the kingdom. So altogether, I think the story of Shield Rising to Shield Hero had an extremely interesting start to it, and got better and better and better while hitting a couple lumps in the road. In between the waves that occur, the story kind of settles down, and if you're paying attention, there is a lot of intrigue that goes on with the socio and political aspect of the series, while Naofumi tries to come to grips with why exactly the kingdom hates him so much, just because he's given this designation of being the shield hero. His relationship with Raptalia is especially one of the better aspects of the series. Raptalia is definitely one of the cooler female protagonists that we've seen in anime thus far, and it's really awesome to see her develop from this timid slave girl into a much more dependable kind of woman. The other main characters are also strong too. I liked Melty. I like her relationship with Naofumi. Philo's kind of a comic relief kind of character. Excuse me, that was loud. Sorry, I might have clipped the mic a little bit there. And all the villains are very well utilized as well. There's a little bit of controversy that goes on with the first episode, and honestly, I don't want to say what that controversy is because I feel like it's a non-troversy, and it's only something that you can really buy into if you have a certain point of view going into it. The timing of this controversy, given the social landscape of the world right now, was maybe a little bit ill-timed. But as far as we know, this controversy doesn't really exist in Japan, and I feel like American the American socio-political atmosphere has kind of changed a little bit, so it wasn't quite as receptive to this kind of thing. So go into this first episode not really knowing what the controversy is, and you might not even know the controversy itself. Just pick up the series from the get-go, kind of going in blind with all that, and hopefully you can look past that kind of controversy. So with that, so the story itself is a big success for me. It hits some lumps in and out of the road at times, but I think it mainly is helped by the strength of the characters, particularly Naofumi. One of my greater fears going into the Shield Hero is that because of what the world is doing to Naofumi, that he would kind of become a little bit of an outcast, a little bit of a loner, a little bit of a woe is me type of character. But honestly, Naofumi kind of embraces being the outcast so well, kind of in a way that it's not even a detriment to his character. And like I said, his relationship with Raptalia is especially likable as well. It kind of starts off a little bit patchy because Naofumi certainly isn't kind to Raptalia, considering the fact that she is a slave. But the more they begin to work together, the more that Naofumi and Raptalia start seeing themselves as equals. And that is a major plus, and it doesn't go down a route where I could see it as a negative kind of a relationship that's honestly sort of toxic. The other characters, like I said, are really strong too. There's not really any central villain, besides the princess who betrays Naofumi, who's an extremely unlikable character. Just from that first episode alone, she's certainly one of the most disliked characters in all of anime that I've seen in a while. So it is nice for the anime community to rally behind hating the specific character. Like I said, there really isn't any centralized villain, at least not yet. As far as this season has gone on, we haven't seen a big boss villain yet, so hopefully we'll get to see that soon. But there's plenty of intrigue, and there's definitely... they've laid down the roots that there could be some greater villains, but they've also laid down the roots that there could be a lot of gray area where villainy is involved. So I definitely like that. let's go ahead and move on to the animation itself. The animation and character designs are really, really strong. Kinema Citrus is really, really well known for having smooth very, very smooth, very fluid animation, and it's definitely noticeable here. There's not a lot of strong Sakuga moments that I'd say Made in Abyss could have, but when the series is allowed the time and energy to have great action sequences with fluid animation, Shield Hero definitely does rise to that occasion. In terms of the sound design and the music is written by Kevin Penkin, who is also the same composer for Made in Abyss. And just like Made in Abyss had a really amazing soundtrack, Penkin did the same exact thing again and gave us another stellar soundtrack. Even now, every once in a while, I pick up a couple tracks off of the soundtrack and give a listen to it. It's very moody, very atmospheric. At times, it also has a lot of orchestral bombastedness to it as well. That certainly does help out as well. It's a very, very nice, calming. It's a very calming and relaxing soundtrack at times, while also getting the blood pumping too. Moving on to how enjoyable the series is. The isekai genre has certainly improved in recent years. This is me coming from an anime fan who has absolutely never liked Sword Art Online or pretty much any of the series that Sword Art Online kind of spawned. But ever since that time I got reincarnated as a slime, ReZero, and then this, I think now anime has found a good way to actually give us strong isekai series without it seeming as though it's complete and total trash like Sword Art Online. I definitely like some of the video game influences in this series as well. This definitely reminded me, in terms of the mechanics of how this other world work, it reminded me a lot of older JRPGs like the Final Fantasy series, like say Final Fantasy 1 and 3. There's a definite like level progression system that you get to see Naofumi go through, and I thought it was really, really neat to actually see that in an anime. So there's a lot of depth to the actual series itself in terms of that. I wish we could have seen a little bit more of the world of Mellow Mark, but like I said, this is only the first season. It's likely going to be expanded more in the second season, so I'll definitely be picking up that second season whenever it comes out, hopefully sometime in late 2019 or early 2020. So with that is the Rising of Shield Hero. It gets a big recommendation from me. Just be very, very careful going into it. Be careful what you hear about with the big controversy that goes on in that first episode. Try to steer clear away from that and try to watch the episode for what it is. And you might not be able to even notice that kind of controversy going into it. So now, let us go ahead and switch gears into the next topic of today's podcast, and we're going to be talking about the adventure game Night in the Woods. So Night in the Woods was developed by Infinite Fall, an independent studio started by Alec Holowaka and Scott Benson, and it was released in February of 2017, before eventually getting console releases for the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and the Switch in early 2018. I just recently picked up the game myself. Sometime during last spring, and I just recently finished it. The game itself was originally a Kickstarter game that I think it raised far beyond its funding goal. And like I said before, you can catch this game on consoles like the Switch, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, or Steam. It doesn't go on sale a lot on the consoles. I picked it up on consoles, I think on the Switch for only like 14 or so bucks, and the game is at retail of $20 itself. So if you are looking to play this game, those are the ways you can play this. It usually does go on sale. So let's go ahead and jump into the actual concept of this game. So Night in the Woods is a side-scrolling adventure series. It is a side-scrolling adventure game where you take control of a young woman and who in this town of anthropomorphic animals, known as Mai, who's a cat lady, who's a college dropout and has decided to come back to her hometown to find that things are not quite the way that she kind of hoped it would be. And the entire game has this basic loop that goes on about it, where you wake up in the morning as Mai, you go out, you visit around the town, you talk to random NPCs, you hang out with your three best friends. You hang out with Angus, a bear. You hang out with your friends Angus, a bear, Greg, a fox, and Bia, a an alligator lady. And that's basically kind of the setting. The game uses a very, very interesting loop where you just kind of don't really do much of anything. You choose what to do throughout the game. You choose which NPCs to interact with. You choose which of your friends that you want to talk to. And just the entire time, there's this underlying layer of intrigue that goes on where you kind of notice where you get to notice kind of the dynamics that goes on in Mai's hometown of Possum Springs, where you get to kind of see this little small town get beat down by a stagnating economy, how there's kind of a lot of old things dying out. There's restaurants being closed down, there's jobs not nearly as available anymore, and then you have Mai, who's a college dropout who had the opportunity to go and do something outside of the small town and decided not to do it. You get to interact with all your different friends. You get to see you get to hang out and kind of learn more about their characters. You get to find out how much they really are taken to Mai actually coming back. And depending on who you hang out with more, it depends on who you actually get to learn more character development. You get to learn more about their characters. And throughout it all, like I said, there's this underlying intrigue where you kind of realize that a lot more has changed in this town than Mai really, really banked on. So the game itself has this interesting plot line going on through it, that you kind of have to just piece together as you go along through it, and you don't really get the full scope of exactly what is going on until a little bit later in the game. And then by that point, hopefully, if you're with the game, there's a lot of payoff that goes along with this entire plot. As character developments reach their peak, you begin to learn exactly why Mai was a college dropout. You get to learn exactly how this town is reacting to the stagnating economy and what they're trying to do in order to fix it. And in some ways, it's very, very intriguing, and it also leaves room for a very, very dark, mature kind of coming of age story, very similar to some of the 80s movies, like The Goonies, or like The Goonies, The Outsiders, and all that. So that's the main concept of the story. Like I said, it's a side scroller. It's kind of a platformer a little bit, but the main, if I were to really compare this to any sort of genre, it's more or less kind of a visual novel. But we'll come back to that in a little bit when we talk about how enjoyable this game is. Let's go ahead and talk about the art style and the graphics and the sound. So the art style kind of reminds me a little bit of the Paper Mario series. It's a 2D plane, and every single character looks like they're kind of a paper cutout. It's very, very simplistic, but it's also stylistic in its approach. And it also leaves room for it leaves room for some surprising expressiveness in the characters' interactions with one another and in their facial expressions. And the backgrounds themselves, while they have this simplistic look to them, they also have a look to them that makes them look surprisingly detailed as well, and very expressive. For how independent this game is, you don't really expect too much for an independent game like this, given the assets that they use, but the assets that they do use are used to their fullest effect ever, to their fullest effect that they can possibly be. So I definitely was very, very surprised by the graphics itself. It's simplistic, but creative, and it's creative and stylistic in its approach. Moving on to the sound and music. The sound design is really, really strong as well. There's not any extremely in-depth sound design like I was talking about in the Resident Evil 2 remake. Excuse me. Had a cough right there. But it definitely is very, very atmospheric. The same could also be said of the soundtrack. The soundtrack has a whole mix of different kind of styles in it that certainly does remind me of some of the indie bands that I listen to in, say, the late 2000s and the late 2000s, early 2010s. It's very, very moody. It's very atmospheric. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Twin Peaks soundtrack by Angelo Badalamenti. The soundtrack itself was written by Alec Alokaka and Scott Benson, so they were working double shifts designing the game while also doing the music as well. And even now, like I said, with the Shield Hero soundtrack, there are many times when I also go back to listening to the soundtrack as well. Particularly, in the game, you also get the chance to play in a band with all three of your friends as well. And the soundtrack and the tracks for the band performances that you actually get to play, because they're kind of a rhythm-like game, are pretty dang cool as well. And they do remind me, again, of some of the indie hipster bands I kind of listened to back in the day, and still kind of listen to whenever I have the chance to. So the sound and everything about the sound is great. So let's go ahead and jump right into the enjoyability and how replayable this game is. So, Night in the Woods is certainly not a game for everyone. This game is catered towards a certain kind of playstyle and a certain kind of person. This very much reminds me of Catcher in the Rye. For me personally, I do not like Catcher in the Rye whatsoever because I cannot connect to the main character, Holden Caulfield. And in that same way, I do not get the feeling that some people are going to connect with Night in the Woods unless you can connect with the main character, Mai. The reason why I say that is because Mai is a very problematic kind of young youth. She's very, very disengaged. She's very, very disengaged. She's very inactive. And she also is struggling to try to find her place in the world, and almost is is almost considering as if it's not even worth it to try to assimilate to a normal life. I'm gonna go ahead and let this cat out of the bag right now, but I think Night in the Woods possibly might be my favorite portrayal of mental illness in a video game possible. I know a lot of people definitely were. I know that people were definitely giving Celeste a lot of brownie points for having a very, 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 very good portrayal of anxiety. As someone myself who has my own struggles with mental illness and anxiety, I definitely connected with Celeste. I almost want to say I connect with Night in the Woods so much more. Every single main character in this game in some way has some sort of struggle with some sort of mental dissociative disorder. In particular, as we figure out, Mai has to keep a journal of herself, which was actually given to her by a therapist, because as she had been growing up in high school and junior high, she was kind of a problem child, and going to her therapist suggested that she journal out her emotions and how she was feeling in order to control them. And try not to spoil this too much, but it's because of her disassociation with society, which is why she ends up dropping out of college anyways. So in the same way that I dislike Catcher in the Rye because I couldn't connect with Holden Caulfield, your enjoyment of Night in the Woods will depend with how much you can connect with the main character Mai and the characters within them. Which hopefully, I think this could be a lot of people. This could really hopefully be a lot of people. A lot of people are becoming more aware of their own mental illnesses, which I think that's healthy. I think that's always health. I think it's healthy to be able to admit to yourself that you have an issue, that you are willing to reach out for help. And if anything, if a video game helps you come to terms with your own mental illness, I think that's awesome. In that same way, unless you're like the perfect kind of person who has every idea of what you're planning to do with your life, Night in the Woods is not going to connect with you whatsoever. If you are someone who notices that your own mental health has deteriorated slightly with your age, as you begin to age, The Night in the Woods is certainly something that's going to connect with you on a very, very personal level. And it connected with me. It connects with me in such a personal level because every single one of these characters feels so incredibly human, which is so ironic because these are just video game characters. And that leans into the biggest strength of Night in the Woods is that the team itself has crafted such an amazing, amazing script. The script to Night in the Woods is so perfect for this kind of game. It knows exactly when to be funny, it knows exactly when to be serious, it knows exactly when to push the heartstrings, and knows exactly when to kind of horrify you too. There's an underlying horror-like aspect to this game as well. And everything about the script the script and the dialogue to this game feels so real. It feels so lifelike. Particularly if you live in the kind of small town that's portrayed in Possum Springs. For me particularly, I live in a small town myself. I've lived in a small town all my life, and I connected to this game even on that respect as well. So there's a lot to this game that I think kind of your mileage is going to vary depending on whether or not you're going to like this game or not. If you live in a big city, then 100% this game is not going to connect with you whatsoever. If you're someone who honestly doesn't struggle with mental illness, unlike a lot of other people, I don't think this game's going to connect with you much either. The bigger issue with this game is that, like I said, it's very, very gameplay light. There's certainly not a lot of gameplay in this game. It's all story first, gameplay second or third almost. So the game can seem like it's a slog sometimes, unless you are intrigued by the main characters themselves. If you're intrigued by the characters in Night in the Woods, if you connect with these characters, then there's so much enjoyment that you will get from this game in the same way that I found enjoyment from this game. So that leans into the replayability of this game. Like I said, there's a constant gameplay loop where you do interact with the townspeople, you interact with whoever friends you want to, and the replayability of this game is that there's so much that you can actually do within these towns. I only spent about maybe 8 or 9 hours on the game itself, and I definitely didn't see everything the game had to offer. There's a lot of different little side areas that you can go to. Throughout the game, you can choose, like I said, you can choose which of your friends to hang out with. You can either hang out with Greg or Angus or Bia, and depending on who you hang out with, and you can also change the game's ending ever so slightly and connect with whichever character that you want to. For my playthrough, I played with Greg because Greg rules, okay? But if I were to play this game again, I could maybe connect with Bia, connect with Angus more, and that could change the development of each of these characters. I know everything I think I know everything I know there is to know about Greg, and I definitely connected with Greg in a way I didn't see myself seeing. But I could replay this game again and see if I could connect with Bia or Angus. I didn't really talk to them that much in my first playthrough of the game, so if I ever feel like picking this game up again, I think I would definitely just explore around, see what else I could do in the town of Possum Spring, Possum Springs. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just give Night in the Woods a big, big recommendation with little tiny asterisks. If you were born in a big city and if you don't personally struggle with any sort of mental illness, I do not think that this game is going to connect with you. However, if you do believe that if you struggle with your place in the world, if you struggle with mental illness, if you struggle trying to live in, say, a small town like I do myself, then Night in the Woods has so much to offer to you on a narrative level that I can't give it any more than my highest recommendation. In fact, I might have to give it my highest recommendation that I've given on the podcast so far. I truly, truly loved this game, and I really, really hope that more people can love this game as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out today's podcast. Today's podcast was probably a little bit shorter than you're used to, but like I said, you listeners are going to have to get used to maybe a couple shorter podcasts for the next couple weeks until my schedule gets a little bit more freer. So with that, there are 2 different recommendations for today. I recommended the anime The Rising of Shield Hero, and I recommended the video game A Night in the Woods. So with that, I'm so glad that you're able to listen to today's podcast. So like I said, if you liked today's episode and you want to see more of it, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe to my channel. Definitely hit that bell icon if you use mobile devices. That way you can know when this new episode pops up every single Friday. If you want to support this channel even further and want to see this channel grow more, please feel free to support me on Patreon as well. Any little bit a month helps. No matter what, I definitely want to see this channel grow beyond the podcast. I'm going to continue the podcast as long as I can. But like I said, if I can make this channel grow further than just the podcast itself, it could mean the world to me. I would love to see this channel grow even further. So with that, I want to give you guys a big thanks for listening on again, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode.